Welcome home, everyone. This is Unrooted, a podcast for those who belong nowhere and everywhere. I am very, very excited to be launching this podcast. It's been in the making for a couple months. I'm just really, really excited, and I really hope you enjoy the first episode. It's mainly just an introduction of Unrooted, me just telling you a little bit of my story and telling you a bit about the podcast, what to expect, and why I started it and what inspired me to start it. So yeah, let's get into it. So first of all, Unrooted is a podcast for internationals, expats, third culture kids, multinationals, people living abroad, studying abroad, or thinking about living or studying abroad, people who have felt caught between identities, cultures, and borders. And in this podcast, we're going to be exploring different aspects of expat life, what it's like growing up in a mix of cultures, living abroad, feeling comfortable away from home, having multiple homes, what that's like, speaking different languages and how that affects our personality, growing up in a country that's different to your parents' native country, for example, feeling unsure of your identity, adaptation, sense of belonging. There's so many topics that are going to be covered, and I'm just really excited to have guests on this podcast. This episode is just me alone, but for the following episodes, I'm going to have a guest or more than one guest on each episode. And we're just going to be sharing experiences and talking about these topics in depth and just personal journeys that I have had or my guest has had. And yeah, it's going to be amazing. And I'm really, really excited. I find these kind of backgrounds to be so interesting. And I just felt like other people would too. And these are stories that should be shared. And it's also an opportunity to provide insights to listeners and know that you're not alone. If you have a similar background, if you have a similar story or international journey in life, you can feel like you can relate and connect and feel at home. This can be one of your homes. This is where you can feel a part of something, a sense of belonging, and maybe where you can find answers. You can hear my story or my guest story and apply it to your own life. So yeah, you might be able to find this information helpful or maybe just entertaining and fun to listen to. There will also be a segment called Ask an Expat. I'll be providing a link in the bio of the official Instagram page of Unrooted, and you'll be able to click on that link and send in a question, something that you're curious about, or maybe you just need advice, or you want us to cover a topic and you want to suggest a topic, then you can send that in too. To be fully transparent, full disclosure, this is my third time filming the first episode, because there was just a lot of technical difficulties or I was just like making up excuses, like I didn't like my hair that day. I felt looked like a Victorian maid in one of the episodes. And I was like, no. That's not why I scratched it. I scratched that episode the second time I filmed it because I lost 20 minutes of footage. 20 minutes. So yeah, I've been battling a few technical things, but I have put everything in place to make sure that this is the last time I film the first episode. And you know what? I saw this Instagram post that said, ships that wait for the perfect winds never sail. And that was like kind of eye-opening for me. I was like, that's the Instagram algorithm telling me to just get on with it. So here I am, getting on with it. and very excited to start this episode. So first off, I just kind of want to share my story, who I am. My name is Michelle, and I am half Spanish, half Danish, and I was born and raised in the south of Spain, in a small city called Marbella. A lot of you who are listening are probably from Marbella, or at least know of Marbella. It's an amazing place. I love it very much. It has a very special place in my heart. And to begin with, one of the reasons why I wanted to start this podcast is it comes from who I am, my identity, where I'm from, my nationalities. I'm half Spanish, half Danish, and because of this, I feel like I've always maybe balanced between two cultures, two identities. I grew up mostly in Marbella, but spent a lot of time in Denmark with my Danish family and in Sweden. And of course, having these two nationalities, it shapes your identity, your personality. And because of this and many other reasons, which I'm going to get into now, I've always felt like I considered myself to be an international person. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to start this podcast, is because I felt like there are a lot of people who have a similar background to me, and I just felt like there wasn't really anything online about this topic, really. I mean, I'm sure there is, but not that much. And so, yeah, I just thought it was a cool opportunity to kind of build a community and just create a platform where people can come and share their stories and their interesting backgrounds. Like in the next episode, I'm going to have a very good friend of mine, Renate, who has a very similar mix to me. She's half German, half Colombian, and has a super interesting background, super interesting upbringing. And you can tell that has really shaped who she is. And she's going to share some really interesting stories in the next episode. So tune in next week for that. But for me, it was, the fact that I grew up in a household that was Spanish, Danish, but also the fact that I went to an international school. I went to a British international school where there was such a mix of cultures and nationalities. And so I had friends from everywhere who also had dual nationality or more than two. And I feel like that's kind of also what started to shape my international identity. So yeah, I was exposed to that from a very young age. But also my mom was a huge influence in that as well, because even though she is Spanish, both her parents are Spanish, my mother was an expat kid. She grew up, most of her upbringing was outside of Spain. First of all, she was born in Canada, and then around the age of, 5 or so, her and her family moved to Congo in Africa, and then eventually Paraguay. She went to boarding school in Argentina, boarding school in England, and then eventually studied in France. So I feel like even though my mom is Spanish, she like isn't like the most Spanish person, isn't the most traditional Spanish person. And I feel like that internationality was ingrained in her at a very young age and definitely rubbed off on me and my sister growing up. And from this, I feel like also me and my sister have become very familiar with other cultures and other customs through my mom, because she grew up in so many different countries and different cultures, some very different from one another. So yeah, I feel like my mom is kind of like the ultimate third culture kid. But that's why I kind of I just wanted to explain that, because I feel like I think these type of like international people, we do belong to a certain niche, if that makes sense. And don't misunderstand me. I'm not trying to say, oh, we're so unique or special or anything like that. It's just, I think it took me a long time for me to understand why I felt disconnected from my Spanishness, why I didn't feel like I was the most Spanish person, which was odd because I grew up in Spain and my mother is technically Spanish. I felt disconnected from my Spanishness, if that makes sense. And from Danish as well, because even though I'm very familiar with Danish culture, I don't really feel like a full Dane at all because I don't speak the language and I didn't grow up there. I don't know what it's like to go to high school there. I really just spent, a few weeks in the summer there, sometimes maybe Christmas. So yeah, you'd think like me growing up in Spain and being Spanish would mean that I maybe feel more Spanish or 80% Spanish, but that's not really the case. And I think it's because of my mother's upbringing, her background, also growing up in a house with a Danish father, and then also this international school in this international bubble of a town called Marbella. And even in Spain, like Marbella is kind of known as like that very international city. And it's a very small city. When I say city, I mean like city/town. And it's super international. It's very interesting. Sometimes I feel, which this is crazy, but I feel like Marbella is more international than Madrid. And Madrid is the capital. I feel living now in Madrid, I feel like I'm really mixed into like real Castellano, very Spanish environment compared to Marbella. And I remember I went to Jerez last summer for a few days just on vacation. And I went to a sherry where they make the sherry, a sherry vineyard. I don't know. Where they make the sherry, and I told him, we were just talking. He was a man from Jerez, and I was just telling him that I'm from Marbella. I said I'm Spanish. He was like, "Oh, where from?" And I said I'm from Marbella, and he's like, "Oh, so then you're not really Spanish." And I was like, "All right." So yeah, I feel like these elements, these factors have really shaped my international identity, but have also confused me, I have to admit, or frustrated me because it has made me feel a little bit lost, or has made me question, like, where do I belong, or what do I belong to? Another little story, I remember meeting some Danish people. I mean, sometimes meet Danish people here and there, not that often, to be honest, not like they're everywhere, but sometimes I'll meet a Danish person. And I remember one time, it just kind of stuck with me for a while, was meeting somebody, a group of Danish people at the beach in the south of Spain once, and I told them that I was Danish, and then they tried to speak to me in Danish. I was like, no, I don't speak the language. And then they said, oh, so then you're fake Danish. And I was like, okay. So from Marbella, not really Spanish, and I'm a fake Danish. It's just like after some time, I'm just like, what the fuck am I? And when I moved here to Madrid and moved into this co-living and was repeatedly explaining my background, because obviously you're meeting a lot of people, I started to really like ponder about all this. And the more I said it out loud, repeating where I'm from and stuff, and kind of maybe getting puzzled looks when I said that I was Spanish, because maybe I don't look like the most Spanish person, I don't look like the most Danish person, I just started to think, I wonder if other people experience this as well. And as I got to know more people here in this co-living, for example, it's full of expats. There's so many nationalities here. People are living abroad from different places of the world, on the other side of the world. And as I was getting to know them more, I was like, yeah, a lot of people do feel like this. And it's a specific type of people who have grown up with similar backgrounds to me, going to international schools, or growing up in a different country than where their parents are from, or growing up in a mix of cultures, or somebody who left home at 18 and hasn't really gone back and has lived in many different countries. Or somebody who's even studying abroad. That already kind of like starts to shape your identity and adds that internationality internationalness, I'm making up words here, to your identity, to your personality. That's one of the reasons that inspired me to start this podcast. I just felt like, yeah, creating a platform where these topics can be discussed, and it's just super interesting, you know. I just like to add as well is like how I feel like I just click more with internationals. I remember like moving to the UK to study in Liverpool, and um and once I got there, I thought I would mix really well with like the Brits, you know, because I mixed very well with them in Marbella because I grew up around a lot of Brits. I went to a British international school. But I soon realized that obviously the Brits that grew up in England are very different to the Brits that grew up in Marbella, because the ones that grew up in Marbella have that they grew up in the same bubble as me. And you know, like when you meet someone from Marbella, you just know, like we all have that little thing in us that's like the person who grew up in Marbella. I don't know. It's like a bit of a bubble, and it's like it takes one to know one. And you just yeah. Yeah. I don't know. And yeah, so once I got to England and I realized that, I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I thought I would like, yeah, end up, you know, being in in groups with like the British and stuff. And there's nothing wrong that I didn't end up being in those circles, but I just ended up clicking more with the other international students. One of my closest friends was from Kuwait. And yeah, I just realized that I fit better into those circles. And the same thing in Spain. Once moving to Madrid, whenever I hang out in Spanish circles, like with people who are really from Spain and have spent most of their lives here, or all of their lives here, I feel like an outsider. I feel like a foreigner. Even like moving here, I feel like I talk like a foreigner. I'll be like, oh my God, these prices are so cheap. And even though I feel like I am home because, like, you know, Spain is familiar. I grew up here. The food is familiar. I'll eat that and I'm like, I'm home. But then I hang out in those circles and I feel like I don't belong. I feel like I don't know, I don't feel part of it. And so that's why I just love this co-living so much, because everybody is from everywhere. And I just feel like that's where I click the most, and or feel the most comfortable, I guess, just because that's what I know from my upbringing. So do any of you dread that question sometimes of where are you from? Do you ever kind of like, yeah, I don't know, do you ever think like, oh, this question again, I'm gonna have to give a whole explanation, or maybe you don't. Maybe you love that question and you love talking about where you're from. And I do too. I think it's just because maybe I've just been dealing with like personal crisis or whatever. After having repeated the same thing each time when I moved here to this co-living, obviously you meet a lot of people at once and you're repeating the same things. And I'm from here, and getting similar questions of like, oh, you don't sound Spanish, or you don't look Spanish, or like, did you grow up in America? Like, blah, 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 you know? And there's nothing wrong. Like they're genuine questions that make sense. To ask somebody who sounds like me, you know, I don't sound Spanish at all. But yeah, I think it just got me thinking after some time. And I think I just struggled a little bit from my transition from the States to Madrid after not having lived in Spain for 10 years. Moving back to Spain for the first time in 10 years, it was a mix of emotions. I was sad leaving my whole life in New York, a life that I had built for the past few years, and starting over again in Madrid. But at the same time, I was really happy because I was going to be closer to my parents, closer to my friends, and also just away from the chaos of New York. And I'm going to talk about that in another episode. But yeah, anyway, back to why I did this podcast. The friends that I've made here in this co-living started to encourage me to do that. And they were saying, you should start a podcast, you should start a podcast. And I really like that idea of, talking into a microphone, into a camera, and just talking about stuff. To give you a little background, I studied acting, and I've always loved, entertaining. So I thought that was definitely something I wanted to do. I just didn't know what about. And then once I finally landed on this idea and the name, something just clicked, and I felt like, this feels right, and I truly believe in it, and I think it can be something, it can build up to be something really, really cool, and something that other people might want to be a part of. So yeah, this is just a podcast for those who, for everybody who has maybe a similar background to me or to my guests, and it's a chance for us to feel a sense of belonging. Like, this is your home. This can be one of your homes, and this is where you can feel seen, accepted, and safe. And but don't worry, this is not like an elitist club. This is, for anybody who is interested in listening, anyone who is having thoughts of moving or studying abroad, anybody who will listen, but yeah, mainly created this platform to share these kind of stories and these experiences. I just want to give a really huge special shout out to everybody everybody in my life who's, supported me and believed in this, and, have told me that they're proud of me, and everybody who's contributed in some way to this podcast, given their insight, piece of advice, tips and tricks, ideas. I appreciate all those people so much, and you know who you are, and thank you so, so much. I just feel so blessed and lucky to have such an amazing support system. So yeah, I love you guys. Okay, and I just want to finish this episode with answering this question of, where is home? Is home where your passport is, or what your passport says? Is it where your family is? Is it where you feel most yourself, most seen, most accepted? And I feel like from the discussion that we've had so far, well, not discussion because I'm the only one talking, but what I've yapped on about so far, is I just feel like, in my case, if it was family, I would have many homes because my family is kind of spread out everywhere. But I feel like family members to some people are going to give you a sense of home. I know not to everybody that's the case, but in my case, family does give me a sense of home. My friends give me a sense of home. And I could say, Marbella is a home for me because it's where I grew up. It's where a big part of me, of my personality, of my identity got shaped. Obviously, our personality gets molded throughout life depending on where you go, and places that you go to can change you and can really affect your personality, change your personality. New York changed me. I'm a different person than I was before I moved to New York. New York ain't for the weak. That shit, you'll come out a different person after New York. I'll tell you that much. So I feel like home can be something that can change throughout your life. But if I really had to choose something, I would say it's an emotional feeling more than a location. Because, and I realized this once I moved to Madrid, actually, once I moved into this co-living, you wouldn't think, or you wouldn't consider that a co-living, which is very similar to a hostel, would be something that you would call home. But I personally can call it home because of the community here, the friendships that I've made here, the connections that I've made. The people here is what makes me feel like home. And the reason for that is because with the people that are here, the expats that live here who are unrooted like me, those are the people that I feel most like myself with. The people that I feel like I am most connected to the authentic version of myself, where I feel understood and seen and accepted. That is what I call home. And I can call this community, this place, my home. And I would say it's my main home right now, because you can have little homes here and there. Like this can be your home, this podcast. Welcome home. And as I said, my family is part of my home for me. It doesn't matter where they are, because like I said, they're spread out everywhere. And like I said, even though Marbella I would consider a home because I grew up there, I've been feeling kind of disconnected from it lately. Anytime that I go there, I'm actually kind of eager to leave. I don't know if anybody feels like that when they go home, like to where you grew up, because I don't know. I feel like this is my main home right now. So if home isn't just a physical place, but more of an emotional feeling, then it makes sense for a person like me to not always know how to define it. But I do know that right now this place feels like home for me, and that could change. And that's normal, I think, for somebody like me, for expats, for third culture kids, for kids that have lived in between cultures, between borders. I feel like that's normal. Home is going to change a lot throughout your years, throughout your life. But that's there's a beauty in that, I feel, because you'll experience so many homes in your life, and you'll be able to have such incredible experiences from each place and carry them with you forever. And each place, each home, each experience is slowly, it becomes a part of you, and molds your character, and you just kind of become a product of your surroundings, of your environment. And because there's been so many, you become an awesome product, a product of all these different places. And you're like I don't know, like a chameleon. Or I'm trying to think of a good metaphor, or what's the word? Analogy? Yeah. You just become a fun mix of things, a cocktail. Who doesn't love a cocktail? um, I'd love a spicy margarita. So yeah, it just shapes this incredible identity. And I guess home is an emotional feeling, and is more about the people who you surround yourself with, the people that are currently in your life. But yeah, that's how I know that this is really like my home, is because of how happy I am here, that emotional feeling, because of the people that I've like surrounded myself with, and also the fact that I'm close to my parents, that's my other home. Yeah. I've rambled on a little bit, but this discussion is open. And I would love to hear from you guys what you consider home, how you define home. Do you have multiple homes, or is it just one place and that is home and the only thing that you would call home? Yeah, I would love to hear what you think, and your thoughts. Please comment or DM. And yeah, that's the end of the episode. That was really fun to talk about all that. And it's always fun to yap. I like yapping. Yeah, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being excited about this episode, this podcast. It means the world to me. This is like my little baby. And I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed listening. I hope this resonated with you in some way. And if it did, please share it with a friend or family member who also feels the same way, who could also resonate to this. Please like, comment, follow, subscribe, share, all the things. I'd be eternally grateful. And I will see you guys next week, next Thursday, same time, 12:30 p.m. Central European time for the dual nationality episode with my bestie, one of my besties, Renate. And lastly, I'm going to be posting snippets and like highlights in the form of reels on the official Instagram page of Unrooted and on TikTok. But if you want the full episode, it's here on YouTube and on Spotify. So yeah, go and listen or continue listening next week and the week after that. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your support. I truly, truly appreciate it so much. And yeah, see you soon. Bye.